Everyone to meeting number 207 of the Planning Committee. Here this evening we have Councillor Aiken, Councillor Grisbeck, Councillor Murnane, Councillor Mason, Mayor Councillor Stephanie Asher and myself, Councillor Trent Sullivan. The procedure for hearing items this evening will be: the officers will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee. The panel may ask questions of the officers. The panel will further discuss the application and make a decision. The decision of this committee is the final decision of the Council acting under delegated authority. If anyone is aggrieved by the decision of this committee, they may appeal to the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne. Our staff can assist with this process during office hours. Do we have any apologies to be noted? None? I'll ask for confirmation of the minutes from the last meeting dated 23rd of April 2020. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mason, seconded. Councillor Grisbeck. Any declarations of conflict of interest? None. Matter for consideration this evening is PP 2432018. 48 to 58, Station Lake Road, Lara. Sorry? Oh, Manzine, my mistake. Absolutely, so it's 9, application PP 471, 2019, site address 913 Manzine Avenue, Lara. Proposal: buildings and works associated with construction of 89 dwellings and removal of native vegetation. I ask the officers to present their summary.
I'm Leanne Stockley, I'm Principal Planner. I'll present the summary here. The subject site is addressed at 9 to 13 Manzine Avenue, which is bounded on the south side by Petulus Road and on the west by O'Halloran's Road in Lara. Approximately 1.5 kilometres west of the intersection with Forest Road North, Petulus and Station Lake Road. The site is irregular in shape with frontage to Petulus Road of 162 metres, to Manzine Avenue of 38 metres and O'Halloran's Road of 161 metres. The total site area is 2.195 hectares. The Petulus Road Reserve is very wide and contains remnant native grasses and some tree species that are not native. A shared path has been partially constructed across the frontage of the site in the road reserve as part of the Manzine Village subdivision contribution of works. Land is located in the southwest corner of the overall Manzine Village subdivision. The subdivision has progressed over the last 6 years with dwellings being developed abutting the northern boundary of the subject site. The overall Manzine subdivision generally gains primary vehicle access via Manzine Avenue, the intersection with Petulus Road, which is southeast of the subject site. However, in the future, the development of the adjacent Lara West growth area will see additional access points via O'Halloran's Road. Keys Road will also provide access to the northern parts of the Manzine Village subdivision. Lot sizes within the Manzine Village subdivision typically range from 300 square metres to 600 square metres, with development of those lots for a combination of single and some double-storey dwellings. The subdivision provides for an open space component through the centre of the overall development, encompassing the former alignment of Manzine Avenue and capitalising on established roadside vegetation, adding to the amenity of the subdivision. The Lara West growth area will eventually provide for education facilities, active open space and local activity centre in the vicinity of the Manzine Village subdivision. Existing neighbourhood character to the south and west of Petulus and O'Halloran's roads is semi-rural with land designated rural living and farming zones. Following permits and site history are applicable to this application. Planning permit 464/2014 for the Manzine Village overall subdivision, and general 479/2014 DPO, which is the assessment of the Manzine Village Development Plan as required by the Development Plan Overlay Schedule 29. This development plan was approved in 2014. In March 2019, an application was received seeking to amend the approved Manzine Village Development Plan. The request was specific to the subject site, which at that time was addressed to 151 to 155 Petulus Road. The application sought for the subject site to be identified as one for either non-residential uses or a medium density use and development. It is noted that design principles were proposed to be included to guide future planning applications. In addition, the wording of the development plan was proposed to be amended to facilitate this. The application proceeded through an informal public notice period, as the application was exempt from formal advertising in accordance with the planning scheme. The notice process provided landowners and occupiers to be informed and to provide comment. The amendments to the development plan were considered and the application was supported. The amended plan was approved in May 2019. Beyond, the current application now seeks approval for the development of the land for 89 dwellings and the removal of native vegetation. The applicant has since lodged an appeal at VCAT due to the responsible authority's failure to determine the application. As such, the assessment here is providing a recommendation for consideration at the relevant VCAT hearings. The development consists of 84 single-storey dwellings. 51 of those are two-bedroom, 27 are three-bedroom, 6 are four-bedroom, and 5 two-storey dwellings, all of those being four-bedroom. Dwelling construction is of face brick, painted render, and vertical and horizontal WeatherTex claddings. Roof styles are hipped, skillion and gable end forms of cement tile or corrugated metal sheet. Dwellings are provided with single garages with an additional tandem space for 3 or 4 bedroom dwellings. The majority of the dwellings are in an attached form. Internal shared vehicle and pedestrian spaces of 6.5 metres in width are provided. Vehicle access is at 2 points from Manzine Avenue. Service road is provided to Petulus Road Reserve. 5 metre shared path will be provided to Petulus Road Reserve as well. And access to Manzine Avenue, Petulus Road and O'Halloran's Road will be provided. Visitor car parking spaces to the Manzine Avenue entry of 13 spaces and additional spaces adjacent to the internal access ways throughout the development of further 6 spaces. Capacity to the site will be 146 spaces. Plans also show indicative landscaping to the common areas. The application was referred to all internal and external units with their comments included in the report. The site is included in the development plan overlay with the application assessed and determined to be generally in accordance with the approved Manzine development plan. The application is exempt from notice and review provisions in accordance with the overlay. However, it was considered that council informal notice should be undertaken. As a result of the notification, 53 submissions were received. As the application is exempt from review provisions, the rights of appeal to VCAT are not available to submitters. Submissions raise concerns for density of development, lack of response to neighbourhood character, traffic generation and car parking concerns, decline in property value, and concern for future occupant quality. The application was assessed against the relevant policies of the planning policy framework and found to be an acceptable response to policy that support housing diversity and affordability. Whilst it's noted that the location at the current time does not have the ideal provision for community services and infrastructure, this will become available when the Lara West growth area adjacent progresses. Assessment also considered the proposal's response to neighbourhood character and provision of urban design aspects to allow integration to the greater subdivision and provision of occupant amenity. It was found that the aspects of the proposal it was found that aspects of the proposal are lacking and can be improved through amended plans conditions, addressing matters such as landscaping, greater separation of built form, and increased amenity and passive surveillance to common areas. On balance, the provision of residential development that provides for a diversity of choice, inherent affordability, and contributes to sustainable development through the use of fewer resources than typical residential subdivision is considered to provide a net community benefit. Whilst the proposal may display some different characteristics to the existing sequence of development, some which may be improved via conditions to any permit that may issue, and this is especially in the opinion of residents of typical residential development surrounding the site, it is, however, considered that the outcome would be acceptable, subject to the recommended permit conditions, and therefore the proposal warrants support under the provisions of the planning scheme. It is recommended that the proposal be considered worthy of support by Council at the forthcoming VCAT hearing, subject to conditions. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome the addition to the panel committee of Councillor Nelson this evening, and also to address everybody viewing from home. Thank you for viewing in under these circumstances. We received 53 submissions in regards to this application. Those submissions were circulated to all councillors, read and thoroughly understood, please be assured. I will now open the floor to questions from council laws to officers. Are there any questions to be asked? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. My first question is related to the Manzini village and at the current time its development. What is the prospective time that we'd have to wait for that development to occur?
Manzini Village subdivision is approximately halfway through in its delivery. It has 12 stages and I think we're up to stage 6.
I apologise, I used the wrong terminology. I meant the Lara West development.
Yeah, Lara West development is, I would say, in its infancy. It has approvals granted. I don't believe that any works have been commenced though, but I'll just check with my team leader.
I think you're correct. So in that case, if somebody builds on this new development, they have no immediate access to services close by.
Correct.
Yeah. And in the same context, I think I've noted that the nearest bus stop is 400 metres away. How far away is the railway station?
I believe about 2.5 kilometres.
Mason. Councillor Aiken.
I've actually got a few questions and they may not necessarily be to the town planner. It may need some of the senior officers to be able to assist the planner in this. So my first question actually relates to, has the applicant given an explanation why they have chosen not to attend tonight?
No, they haven't.
Is it wrong of us to consider that that's disrespectful to the process that they're not prepared to attend before tonight's council meeting?
Councillor, my understanding is they weren't invited along because of the COVID restrictions in place. So, having said that, they didn't make a submission prior to the committee.
They chose not to present in any way before the panel, and I think the councils need to understand that as well too. They've chosen not to make any representation before the council.
Other than their application
That's
itself.
Right. Yep. Now, just clarification as well too is that the original development plan overlay, was that advertised? And that is the original development plan overlay, which actually said that this area was to be commercial usage. So was that development overlay advertised?
Rezoning.
It was.
The rezoning was
and
advertised.
Is it correct?
The development plan
yeah.
wasn't. However, the amendment to the development plan that changed the subject site, some notice of that was given and submissions received.
So for the just this is for the benefit of other councillors and for clarification of myself, it is correct to say then that when this was advertised, it was advertised as commercial site location. So the community did have an opportunity to understand that's what the usage was going to be. And that's what was actually advertised in the first instance for the regional development plan.
In 2014, you're talking about? 2014 or more recently? When it originally...
No, I'm not talking about recently. When it was originally put out to the community of Lara, this was actually a development plan overlay which said that this site location was going to be used for commercial usage under the overlay. So the community had an opportunity to respond at that particular time that it was going to be commercial usage, or if they wish to.
Development plan in place nominated it as commercial uses that were permissible in a residential zone.
And then they did have, the developers then requested under the overlay which had been granted to change it from commercial to residential. And council did grant that change under the overlay without public exposition of that proposal.
Was the notice given of the change that changed its nomination to commercial and then changed it to be more flexible to allow for?
There's no formal process for the broader community to actually express either support or opposition to the change from commercial to residential.
It was for that?
No. And then we've also, the reason why the people are being called submitters is because the overlay actually says that you cannot object to the proposals that, so the overlay, once it was originally put in place the first time around, actually restricted the community to be able to have a say on the applications.
Right to review the VCAT notice, the statutory notice, aren't available here.
Was it true to say that that statutory notice was on the basis that the community thought it was going to be commercial land, because now it is residential land? So that's an argument that a lot of the submitters are making, that when they were given the opportunity in a formal process to be able to respond to this, it actually was commercial usage land. Now that it's residential land, they have been not given that opportunity to be able to respond to the usage of the land as residential.
Underlying zone of the land hasn't changed, and it was allowed for residential uses as of right.
And is there an explanation why the 60 days decision-making process wasn't actually adhered to? Because the applicant has now lodged directly with VCAC to say that council didn't fulfil its statutory responsibilities to advertise within 60 days. What was the explanation for that?
By the applicant?
Why council didn't meet the 60 days decision-making process?
Only say that it was a complex application where there were amendments to the plans along the way. It's a pretty involved, complex application, I would say. Councillor?
More complex, is it? I would have thought it would be more complex if you actually had to engage with the broader community.
Part of the assessment was taken out, but we still sought submissions, but it still requires a thorough assessment. Councillor?
And for those submitters, what strength does the council's position have before VCAC on this particular proposition? Because we actually have to present before VCAC because it's actually it's already gone to VCAC because of the applicant. So what position does council, does the developer have the opportunity to, if council agrees to the application tonight, they can actually withdraw their application to VCAC if council issues a permit, or if it still goes ahead irrespective of what decision council makes tonight?
The position of the planning committee tonight will be the position that will be put to the tribunal. The tribunal will still need to make a decision, given that the appeal's been lodged. At the moment, the planning committee was to support the application, and the applicant had agreed with all the conditions in the recommendation or the decision that was made by the planning committee. then one would assume that some form of consent order would eventuate.
Do we have any other examples within the City of Greater Geelong in the most recent years of this complexity of decision-making and process? Because I'm not aware of anywhere we've had overlays and overlays change and no public not having the opportunity to formally object. Do we have other examples, or this is the first one for quite a while?
The development plan overlay is quite a common tool in the Geelong planning scheme, which is the tool that limits notice and review. So it's a common overlay for new residential areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. On page 60 of the documents that we have before us is an appendix which talks about the neighbourhood character objectives. In this, so the development is required to be assessed against clause 55. And in there we talk, the council says that, in the comments, that the development is an extent and attached form, that it is at odds with the typical residential development located within the Manzine Village estate and does not provide a high degree of response for preferred character guidance of the Manzine Development Plan. Would you say that that means that it's not within the character for the Lara structure plan as well?
That the proposal, as it's put to us with such a high degree of attached form, is at odds with the typical residential type development that is generally seen in the Lara area and certainly in the Greater Manzine subdivision. I can't say that it's... I'm sorry, I can't recall any specifics of the Lara structure plan that it's at odds with.
Some of the submissions that were made on behalf of the community talk about that it is at odds with the Lara structure plan. So I'd love to see if you've got a copy before the end of the meeting tonight to see if it is in fact against the they talk about where is it? That it's in direct conflict of the Lara Structure Plan 2011 and the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme to maintain and enhance rural characteristics of Lara. And so I just wonder if you have any comment in relation to that. Maybe you can take that on notice before the end if that works.
Happy to answer now,
Yep.
Councillor. The underlying zone of the land is a residential zone. It's not in a rural residential zone or a rural living zone. Sorry. So, and the strategic planning framework for this area, being the development plan overlay, and then the development plan, which nominates this site for medium density housing, I would say is a correct strategic planning framework in which should be assessed.
So when you say medium density housing, what's the council's view? What constitutes medium? Because I think if I look at the plan right now, 89 townhouses on around a 5-acre block, to me that's high density, just from a councillor perspective. So I just wonder what you figure as medium density.
So this particular density per hectare is right on the upper cusp of what we'd consider medium density, so at 40 dwellings per hectare. Council has a guiding document, the Housing Diversity Strategy, which nominates the range of between 20 and 40 dwellings per hectare as being medium density. Anything above 40 is nominated as high density.
Murnane?
A long court drawn there.
Frontage road is there to enable vehicle access to the lots that front Petulus Road. Given the width of the Petulus Road Road Reserve, there was an ability to provide that frontage street. It will be a public road, so it will be under the management of council, so any person could access that, yes.
That has access of Manzine Avenue. So the other internal roads that come down and meet that, they don't seem, are they drawn that they connect?
Yes.
Drive through the estate and come out in those two. Okay. What about the ones on O'Halloran Road? Do they connect? What about there's two there drawn that connect? That seem to be. Is there any connection from the estate onto O'Halloran's Road?
No.
No. Okay. Is there going to be future opportunity for that, or
not for any connection through to O'Halloran's, apart from for pedestrian use?
So is O'Halloran, the land there on the right-hand side of it, is that residential for further development, or is that, what's that?
When you say right-hand side?
Well, the land on the other side of O'Halloran's Road. On the one side we've got this estate. On the other side, is that residential?
That will be future residential, so that is part of the Lara West growth area. Clause 50.
Density.
I'm sorry.
Is that because of the density?
The number of dwellings, yes, it's a direct response to that. So for every 5 dwellings to a development, one car park space is required to be provided for visitor car parking.
If I may, one moment, Councillor Mason, Murnane, could you please adjust your microphone so it's picking you up?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. The other question I had is that is it usual to have an estate like this where community services are going to be provided into the future?
Can you ask that question again?
Well, I think you said before that some of the community services will be provided with future development. Is that normal? Do we normally do that?
Not necessarily we as council. These are community services such as neighbourhood activity area or public parks and so on. They are usually provisions that come out of a greater subdivision, usually contributions that are provided by the subdividers.
Councillor Murnane. Councillor Asher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One quick, simple question for me. How many other developments in the Lara area have this sort of density?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Maybe I could ask local. Zero, yes, I wondered. It looks to me more like a City of Wyndham style density than what I would expect for Lara. Thank you. I just wondered whether this was second of 4 or first of any. Yep, thanks.
Any further questions? So I'll turn back to Councillor Mason first.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. First, I've read that the waste collection, I think that the turning circle of council operators is too large for this development, and therefore private collection is to be the method. Is this normally regarded as a sustainable thing over time? That we have to rely on external operators for council services?
I don't think it's necessary that we consider that it's council relying on external services. It is a choice of the developer to provide an internal layout of a particular width and turning spaces that can only be catered for by private contractors. That part of the assessment is undertaken, and it was confirmed that they have chosen to undertake a private waste collection service.
Thank you. And in terms of safety, I'd read that the overview, due to fencing, etc., is difficult in some circumstances. Has that been remedied, or is that still a problem?
Passive surveillance,
Yeah.
so the idea that in communal spaces that you have some safety because you are being observed. This particular design that we're assessing here can have some improvements. My recommendation included some of those changes that would result in improvements to the dwelling design that would increase passive surveillance. So at the moment, the current plan could certainly do with some tweaks in that area.
Grisbeck.
Thank you. On page 48 and 49, we talk about the assessment in relation to the general residential zone, and we talk about some of the comments made in there around it is acknowledged that this site is not located within the boundaries of the Lara West Precinct Structure Plan. However, it is considered that the principles for the location and various types of this house within medium density development provides with a great useful comparison tool to consider this site, and it is correct that it is opposite on the other side of the road in terms of the Lara Structure Plan. Question about the Lara West Structure Plan. The Lara West Structure Plan calls for a fair amount of open space. I see in this development that there is not a park, not any amenity for the local people that will be using this site. How did we assess that particular element in this?
This particular property is part of the Greater Manzine Village subdivision. That subdivision, in its original assessment or planning permit application, the developer of the Manzine Village estate was required to supply a of land contribution to public open space. They did that via the Central Spine location that is or what used to be the Manzine Avenue. So the applicant's response to questions about whether there was going to be any open space provided to this particular development was, we don't need to, there is no requirement to, it's already been provided, and that is a correct statement on their behalf.
Another question was that obviously the Manzine Avenue Development Plan overlay has caused what I would say in the community as some real angst around the development as a whole, and it has had a big negative impact on some of the things that we've had to deal with at council, things like childcare centres and road blockings of roads and all of those sorts of things that we've dealt with over the past few years since I've been in council. Obviously, the development plan overlay didn't require the applicant to do a community consultation process. Was there an opportunity? Did the developer? Was it suggested to the developer that they should do some type of consultation in the best community engagement piece? I think is the question. Obviously, council's not mandated for them to do it, but was it suggested to them that it would be a good neighbourly thing to do to sort of bring in the residents' ideas?
Certainly that conversation was had. Again, the applicant knew the provisions of the development plan overlay and what they were required by the planning scheme to do or to not to do. So their response was, well, we won't be undertaking the notification if council was in a position that they wanted to undertake an informal process. We don't particularly agree, yes. But effectively they...
And I think given that both Anthony and I had some good conversations with the senior management of the planning department and agreed that from our perspective that some type of process was we could do some type of process that would give the community the opportunity, and we see the 53 submissions received, so it shows us the community's views about this. Did that sway the council in any way necessarily on the outcome of this report? I mean, I guess you have to do it by the book. I'm just asking, was that a consideration for council?
As planning officer undertaking the assessment, I gave some heed to the submissions. On the whole, though, I think that my general assessment is more swayed to the policy context.
Is it right to say that when the lots were sold necessarily, if this is your understanding, when the lots were sold to those around necessarily in Cadence Avenue and a few of those sort of avenues along the way, that it was sold to them in a way that this would be a commercial area? Is that your understanding?
There was a notation to some of the documentation that it could be used for a commercial use that was permissible under the general residential zone. The underlying zoning of the land has never changed. So, some research by a potential buyer would see that it was a general residential zone.
From what I understand, the original intent was to have a commercial type operations that were allowed in general residential zones. Was that what you were saying before?
The development plan, so if people had that expectation, I can understand why they might have it.
Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and apologies for being late. This, on page 23, it says, lot sizes range between 400 to 900 square metres, with a small percentage of multi-unit sites present. Yet I can't find anywhere in this application where it says that what the lot sizes are. Yet when I scroll through, I can find it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the smallest lot size is 181 square metres. Is that correct?
There's been no commentary with regards to the lot sizes of the proposal. That comments with regards to 400 to 900 is with regards to the character of the residential area to the east of the site. This particular application does not include subdivision, and so there's no need to make any commentary about the lot sizes.
So are there lot sizes at 181 square metres?
There may well be. It's not a necessity for us to assess that.
89 townhouses on that property, Councillor Nelson, you probably would be right.
And is there anywhere, that leads to my next question, is there anywhere in Lara where lot sizes are 181 square metres?
Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
It goes to neighbourhood character. I'm trying to establish neighbourhood character.
Probably be.
I've lived in Geelong most of my life, and my understanding, people don't move to Lara to move into 181 square metre lots. It's not why they would move to Lara.
One more question, Chair, sorry, and my community would be very upset with me if I didn't mention traffic. Obviously, with 89 potential townhouses, if you were to say there's 2 cars, for example, per townhouse, you're talking in the vicinity around about 200 cars coming and going from this site. Besides that cul-de-sac that Councillor Murnane was referring to before, there is seen to be only one way in and one way out of that. Would that provide some sort of bells ringing in planning from a planning perspective?
It was assessed by Council's traffic engineer, and there were no concerns raised for the ability for the greater street network to absorb that traffic generation.
And so Lara traffic, there is a Lara traffic management plan which the engineering department we recently approved. we talked about the stress and the pressure on roads around Lara, and obviously the community is rightly hoping that we then start to implement a lot of those changes and repairs and things that were going on. The Manzine Avenue estate basically comes out onto Petroulas Road. That is a thoroughfare coming in and out of the town. Do we not see that adding those amount of cars onto both Manzine Avenue and then onto Petroulas Road is an issue in the current, you've got a huge estate there. Do we not see that adding that amount of cars is an issue?
I can only refer to the assessment that was made by Council's traffic engineers. I really can't provide any further comment from a planning officer perspective. It wasn't raised as a concern by the traffic engineer, and so that's all I can add.
Thank you. There's no further questions. I will ask for a recommendation and then move to councillors for comment. Do I have a recommendation to be moved? Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you, Chair. I've got an alternative recommendation than the one that has been put up, and I'll just read that through if that's where we go. Okay. The alternate recommendation that the responsible authority considering all matters to the Planning and Environment Act 1987 requires it to consider, recommend at VCAT to refuse the grant of a planning permit buildings and works associated with the construction of 89 dwellings and the removal of native vegetation at 9-13 at Manzine Avenue, Lara on the following grounds. The proposal is not consistent with the objectives of Clause 15, including Clause 15.01-1S, urban design, as it fails to create an acceptable environment that is safe, functional and enjoyable through the lack of landscaping and pedestrian space, and Clause 15.01-5S, the neighbourhood character. It does not respond to the existing neighbourhood character or reinforce the valued pattern of dwelling spacing and subdivision. Number 2, the proposal is not consistent with the strategies of Clause 16.01-2S, which is the location of residential development, including the higher density housing development on sites that are well located in relation to jobs, services and public transport. The proposed locations and design are not consistent with the strategies of Clause 16.01-3S, which is housing diversity, where the design does not provide acceptable occupant amenity and as a result is continuously attached density and the lack of vicinity to services. And the strategies include to encourage the development of well-designed medium-density housing that respects to neighbourhood character, and B, to ensure planning for growth areas provides a mix of housing types through a variety of lot sizes, including higher density in and around activity centres. 4, that this proposal is not consistent with the strategies of Clause 21.06, which is settlement and housing, including 21.064 in relation to neighbourhood character, and it is not responsive to nor respectful of the established character of the area. Number 5, this proposal is not consistent with the strategies of Clause 21.08-4, which is open space, as it does not provide an open space to the site where the residential density is proposed to be increased. Number 6, the proposal is not generally in accordance with the Manzine Development Plan, which is the Development Plan Overlay Schedule 29, as the density proposed is excessive in its delivery of the medium density development, and the proposal does not sufficiently respond to the objectives and or standards of Clause 55, including the neighbourhood character and objectives, the safety objective, landscape objectives, parking location, daylight to new windows objective and private open space objectives. And this proposal is not consistent with 65.01 of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme, including the purpose of the zone, orderly planning of the area and the effect of the amenity of the area and the density of the proposed development. Now, I'm sorry that was a large read, but that's the alternate recommendation.
Very well done, Councillor Grisbeck. I would ask for a seconder for the alternative recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Councillor Grisbeck to speak to the recommendation.
Thank you. In considering this application, we are obviously required to have the council has done a good assessment of the plan. I know Councillor Aiken and I were really keen to hear the community's views on this. Having received 52 submissions, which were, I think, 99% in the negative, being that they did not want this subdivision, this particular submission to go ahead, they used words like that it's not what was promised. When they signed contracts for their land, it was not what they were allowed. I had one comment that said we couldn't even get a brick pillar rendered out the front of our house, yet we would agree to 89 townhouses going next door. I think what there was obviously many people that were really that bought their homes that are their forever home and thinking that they were going to have a nice cafe or something behind their house that they would be able to use as part of the residential development there. And what they get lumped with is 89 townhouses, and it's not the hot density that they would expect to be in Lara at this point in time. It is out of character with the local area, and I've heard from many, they have all contacted me, nearly all 53 of them, and Councillor Aiken and I have spoken to many of them to make our decision here in the chamber, so I understood what their view is. I feel that this is out of the neighbourhood character. It is not within the amenity of Lara, and it really just screams like we're in an inner city suburb. And we are not an inner city suburb. We are a country town that, yes, we need to have development, but this high density development is not what we asked for, and it is not within, in my view, it is not within the purview of the Lara structure plan. And we make these plans so that we don't actually go outside of those plans. We make these plans with communities, and we all agree that that is the nature and the feel that we want, and this is particularly outside of that. I feel quite strongly about this application, and I think that the community has rightly told us that this is not what they want. Thank you.
Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Look, first comments I wish to make, this is actually really planning and justice for the community. Planning actually has a well-known process of allowing the community to participate in the planning process, and what's actually happened here is technical planning criteria have been used to exclude the community from the process, and as Councillor Gresbeck and the broader community that has put their opposition to this planning application, the original overlay was advertised to say that this would be commercial land to service the residential components of the original development plan. That's actually why the overlay was created, to create a development plan at that site location to enable residential development and then to enable some commercial development at the front to service that residential area. And a very clever planning application process was obviously seen by the applicant that they could actually change that. Change it from commercial to residential without giving the community an opportunity to participate. And it hasn't been fair for our officers either, that's what they've had to deal with as well too. Our officers are committed to the principles of the planning process, and they do believe in public engagement and giving the public an opportunity to express their views about planning applications. But in this case, their arms were tied behind their back as well too, in that the developer and applicant was very clever to use the planning process to try to exclude community participation and community feedback on this proposal. And that it may not be a planning criteria to make an assessment, but I actually think the applicant in no way should be rewarded for actually ignoring the community in this process. In fact, Council should be using its position and opportunity to represent the community at VCAT to strongly speak against this applicant in terms of the manner that they've used the process to get to the point where we are today. They've shown stealth in the way that they've actually tried to deal with this planning process. They didn't have the courtesy of allowing the council planning officers to... They've already said to us this is an extremely complex planning process. It did need more than 60 days. The applicants used another technicality to try to avoid proper scrutiny of their planning application. And the sad thing is that what we look for, and I certainly look for as a councillor when I represent my community, and I look at planning applications in other parts of Geelong as well too, I actually look to see if the applicant has actually tried to work with the neighbouring community and actually try and see if their application is in harmony with the broader community. And in fact, this doesn't. Not only has the applicant attempted not at all to work with the neighbouring community, you actually see the character of this particular proposal is totally out of character with not only the surrounding areas, because the surrounding area actually is a major arterial road which has large residential allotments on it that are acreages. It is not predominantly residential in intense urban and high density basis. In fact, the main road, Platoos Road, has recently only been removed, downgraded from 80 to 60 kilometres an hour because it still is a major road. So from a planning sense, yes, it made sense that you had commercial activity on a major fronting a major thoroughfare. But this proposal now is actually trying to suggest that we will put 89 high-density townhouse developments on this site location. And then you actually look at the broader Lara structure plan and you look at the broader footprint of Lara. There actually is no other example in Lara where there is 89 townhouses actually being built in a concentrated area. So it is totally out of character with the broader Lara structure plan for that community as well too. So I do believe that this application should be strongly rejected tonight, and we should be giving the confidence to our officers that they do represent before VCAC the strong opposition of the community, because there's 53 applicants that have gone out of their way to submit, because this isn't a formal process. We've been advised of that. This is actually, they've made submissions because they are totally aggrieved by the process that this applicant has actually used to push their planning application before the council, and in fact now bypassing council and going straight to VCAT. So the council officers and those representing us legally before VCAT do need some strong language and some strong confidence that they do represent the interests of the council, they do represent the interests of the 53 strong objectors. Lara does not want this proposition. Lara has not had the opportunity properly to be able to express their views about this application, and both the officers and Kylie and I have been hamstrung in relation to this because of the injustices of the planning process that actually exists with this particular proposition. So I encourage my other councillors to look at those facts when they make their own decision and to support strongly that we should be rejecting and refusing this application, and also give the confidence to our planning team that present before VCAC, explain the facts before them, and the tribunal hopefully will reach the same conclusion what we have done, which this is a planning injustice. It is totally out of character for the surrounding area. It's totally out of character for the Lara structure plan, and the applicant should not be rewarded for ignoring the principle of community participation and actually trying to work with your community to have good planning. Thank you.
Councillor Aiken. Councillor Murnane.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think it's been mostly said. I think I got the message from Councillor Aiken that he was concerned about the lack of community engagement. And I totally agree with you. And it's one of the principles that really I think we have to hold on strongly to. But Councillor Grisbeck actually gave a very good summary of why this is out of character. I look at a third of the actual dwellings are 3 or 4 bedroom, and to me that really says that this could be large families. And even the other third at 2 bedrooms, 50 at 2 bedrooms will have families. And I think the most poignant thing that Councillor Grisbeck said is that this is probably something that belongs in closer to central Melbourne or a more dense environment. And I really can't see this as being a natural development in the location that it is. And I really can understand why the people of Lara are not really embracing it. And I would have thought that some really good consultation could have come up with a better solution. So I think we really do have to be mindful of the communities that we're building to make sure that we're building communities that people are going to be able to live successfully in, and I'm not sure that's the case here. So I'm inclined to support the alternative motion.
Councillor Murnane. Councillor Mason.
Having heard all of these strong arguments, I have to agree with them, but I do have some other observations as well, Councillor Sullivan. It's disturbed me really that having sat through quite a number of planning sessions, we recurrently seem to be hit with proposals which are on the limit. We have criteria that have a spectrum of minimum and maximum standards, and we continue to get hit with something like this, where it's pushing the limit. And though any particular limit might be within the bounds of the set criteria, the cumulative effect is one that is to the detriment of neighbourhood character, detriment to the spirit of it. And really, I don't think we should be, I heard the word very clever, I think it's a little bit too clever to be looking for the maximum each time and build something according to, right on the edge of these criteria. And so the cumulative effect has been, as I just said, the neighbourhood character is to the detriment of that. It's to the detriment of safety, to the detriment of the open space and in the environment. And also, did I say safety? Also that. So all of those things, I think we need to be mindful of the minimum and maximum standards, and we should not be pushed to accept everything that might be within the limit but on the borderline. Thank you.
Councillor Mason. Councillor Asher.
I will really echo all the comments that have been so well articulated so far, and I'm just imagining if there was a gallery full of people tonight, if we were allowed to actually have the people of Lara with their submissions and just how packed and how passionate they would have been in this room. So, and I think rightly so. For me, I look at this and it is out of character. I think the process has been not necessarily deliberately stealthy, but overall it's come across as a something of a stealth move, so I support the alternate.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I certainly support the alternate recommendation that's put forward. I have to be careful and mindful with what I say. Only 53 objections yet. I remember one that came through this chamber that was voted for, which probably had more than 200 objections, yet my fellow councillors decided to vote for it, which is in the past. And that's, I tried to look it up just now to see how far away that was from its local shop, probably 2 kilometres away from the closest local shop. Yet that development got through as well. Not even a footpath to get to the local shop. But that's not what we're deciding here yet. That's what people have to put up with. So to Councillor Mason's point, limits, planners, developers go to their absolute limit. Maybe the limits are wrong. Maybe the state government's limits are wrong of both sides. 40 dwellings per hectare is just far too many. That's not what Lara is about. It's not what I think Lara is about, and I'm sure that's not what Lara residents think it's about. I think the limits need to be changed. I think it should be what's fair and reasonable. And I don't think that's either fair nor reasonable. That's what I work with Monday to Friday, what's fair and reasonable, and I don't think this is fair or reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Before I put this to the vote, I'll just have my own comments. I would express my sentiments of both the owner and the applicant. It seems that every time we have an applicant come towards the committee for the Manzine estate, the underlying theme is the same, that the community feels misled and underrepresented. They're getting promised A, they're getting B. And it doesn't take a skilled eye to look at this application and just see that the maximum amount of houses and estates have been put through in the smallest area for what would seem to be the most gross profit. With that being said, I'll put this to the vote for the alternative recommendation. Sorry? Oh, you don't have to, but if you wish to have the right. Councillor Grisbeck, the right to
Sorry,
close.
Chair, I just want to close the comments out just quickly. In closing, I think the COVID scene has provided me with some further perspective about community, and I think if anything else has come from COVID, it is that we now really we are spending a lot more time at home, and it has provided me some further perspectives. This is how we live and how we will now work, because a lot of us are working from home, and this is where our kids grow up. This is a high density site that is not near public transport, is not near shopping centres, it is not near walking tracks, and I for one won't support an application of such high density that doesn't have, hopefully, the infrastructure, as Councillor Nelson said before, that the infrastructure is not there and it doesn't go with it. Our community does deserve better than this, and I don't want applicants, as has been mentioned before, to just think about the profits. Then they really should be now thinking about, we're in a stage now where they should be thinking of neighbourhoods, they should be thinking about what it's like to live there. We want developers that care for our area, we want developers care for Geelong, they live in the area, they want to increase the benefit and increase the amenity of the town. And it was mentioned to me over the past few weeks that the word goat farm is not something that I would like to bring up ever again, but the term has been used that this town will not stand for something that they're so passionate about, and you've seen the issues that have come before them. That they've talked about, do we need to get a petition? So this is something that they're super passionate about, and I would thank my fellow councillors for what they've